So a while ago, I had the idea of taking full-size cosplay helmets and shrinking them down into bus-size painting projects. I did this Tiefighter one quite a while ago, and I want to do the X-Wing variants now. So this is the project of painting that X-Wing variant. And both these helmets I got from Galactic Armory. I was sort of worried about how I was going to do the clear visor, because 3D printing clear resin is not as straightforward as you would want it to be. But I think I managed to get as good as a clear visor as I could. Like most of these projects, it starts by just taking all the support sprues off and cleaning up all of the prints as best I can. Luckily with this one, there wasn't that many issues. I just maybe over supported a bit because of the weird shape. And then just sanding off any layer lines that you can visibly see. Luckily, even with that weird shape, I managed to angle it just right so that the layer lines didn't really show up at all. And then clipping out the clear visor. Annoyingly, it clouded over quite badly once the resin had fully cured. So I had to go in and kind of sand it and buff it. It didn't end up being completely clear, but I suppose it's clear enough for what I needed it to be. I did try a few different techniques of trying to make the clear visor, but they didn't really work, like the fire method where you burn it, polishing compounds. I just think it may have been a bit too thin to polish up well. I had the idea of putting in a bust to kind of fill out the headspace of the helmet, but I didn't really like the way it looked in comparison to the Tiefighter one. It was just so much bigger of a profile. Maybe it would have worked, but I just didn't like the way it looked in the end. So I went on the internet and I found some aviator helmet STLs, and I figured I could just push that into the cavity of the helmet and it would just bulk out the silhouette and the look of the model a bit. It was a bit of a pain to get in. Had to kind of really ram it in there and crank it down and try and not break anything. But it eventually went in, and I think it looked pretty good in the end. And the STL for the helmet came with this little chin strap, so I had to figure out how I was going to implement that with a strap or some way of attaching it. Initially I was going to paint the aviator hat outside of the helmet, but with how difficult it was to get in and out, I just had to glue it in and paint it in situ. I've painted quite a lot of white armor, heavily weathered now, and I always start with a Rhinox hide base, so it's not just a pure black, there's some brown in there as well. And I just airbrush it all over the model. And then I go in with the gloss varnish, so I can do the heavy chipping medium over the top of that as just a general chipping technique. I leave quite a long time between the varnish going on and drying before I put the chipping on, just to make sure that it's fully cured and isn't going to move at all. And then I went in with some Tamiya XF2 white. It's just such a good white. It's so smooth when you get it on correctly. And it took quite a lot of coats to get it to where I wanted it to be. Annoyingly, I forgot to add this anthracite grey that I use on a lot of the white armour, just as in like this bluey tone. So I just had to go back over the white with the grey and then go back over with the white again. It doesn't really make any difference. Once you have it on there, the chipping happens exactly the same. And then I just went in with the chipping, using the water on the brush to reactivate the chipping fluid underneath, and just started scratching it, chipping it, just damaging it in carefully and controlled ways. I find the knife is just the easiest way of getting the chips that I want to see in the shapes that I want to see them. You just have to brush off all of the paint that's coming off, otherwise you just have paint flakes everywhere. This is probably the longest process in the whole painting process. It's trying not to overdo it, but enough so that it looks good and random enough that it doesn't look applied. In a way, I kind of chip as I would edge highlight. It's kind of just defining those edges and shapes. Now I've left quite a large open space where the Rebel logos will go when I put the transfers on, because I'm going to chip through those anyway, so there's no point in causing issues further down the line. Just leave them blank. You do have to be slightly careful to not chip all the way through to the resin layer, and I think I did on that particular chip. I just went a bit too far, so I just had to paint in a bit of black later. And that was the chipping. I tried to not do it super heavy, but enough so that it looks like they've gone through the walls a bit. And then just using the gloss varnish to seal all the chips down so I don't do any more chipping and prevent the work that's done already from being destroyed. And then it was on to the transfers. So these are from Angry Space Triangles. They have loads of Star Wars and general sci-fi transfers. You do have to cut quite close to the transfer. They're not like GW transfers where they have like a predefined area. This is just an entire sheet with the transfers printed on. But they are quite thin, so they go on pretty well. I just load my transfers up with clean water and wait for them to start to separate. And then just try to place them roughly where I need them to be and just pull that paper backing off. Annoyingly with Star Wars type helmets, because they have the two emblems on either side, they both have to be pretty symmetrical. You can get the first one on and place it wherever you want, but it's getting that second one in a symmetrical looking fashion to the first one I found really difficult to get right. I think if you look on the Tiefighter, if you look at it dead on, it's slightly off to the center on one of them, and it kind of really bugs me, but there's not a lot I can do about that now. And then I'm just using some micro sol to soften it a bit. It was sort of flexing a little bit and had a fold in, so I just needed to try and get rid of that. And then this was trying to get the second transfer into a symmetrical position to the first. And I think on this one, it went better than the Tiefighter one. I really kind of just pushed it around and waited and tried looking at it from every angle, and I think I got there eventually. Luckily, with the size of these transfers, you can just kind of push them around a bit with water. And that was me praying that it was as symmetrical as I could make it without it looking bad. I thought it was looking a bit bland and uninteresting, so I added a few more transfers on. I think this 5 came from the Cadian transfer sheet. And I had some more transfers from angry space triangles in the Star Wars language. It's just at the top there on the left, like an IO or something. I saw these little skulls on the Cadian transfer sheet, so I just added that on as well. I didn't really go into the correct markings for Star Wars because I just didn't see the point and I just didn't want to do it. And then just one final varnish layer, which is this AK Ultra Matte. It really goes on super smooth and the white just looks really great afterwards. Something I do on a lot of my Star Wars projects are these random straight lines. You can see it on the Tiefighter helmet where it has a blue line across its face, and on the K2SO where I have the white stripes as well. So I wanted to add those same stripes into the Tiefighter helmet, and I added it onto the side in red, just spacing out the width of the tape basically to make the width of the stripes. It's kind of the long process, just making sure the tape is exactly where you want it and is spaced out correctly, and then masking everything up so you don't spray red over white. And then I just use some Evil Sun Scarlet for the red. Just add a couple of layers of that just to get a nice coat. And then it's the really satisfying part of peeling all the tape off and hoping that the tape doesn't pull the varnish off. That's the cool thing with these like stripes, is you get a really striking bit of colour into the pure white immediately, which is quite cool. And then obviously I needed to add some chipping damage to the red stripes, so I just took the knife to it and started cutting parts of the red out. I loosened a bit of it with the water just to make it a bit easier to take the red off. Annoyingly, it was getting a bit liquidy as well, so some of the red was staining the white, so I was trying to avoid that. And then trying not to overdo the chipping, just enough to make it look cool, but not enough where I've just wasted all my time putting it on. And then it was on to the painting portion, I guess. So I've been using these raw umber watercolor oil paints. They're not really oil paints, they come in the same tube, but they're watercolor paints. I prefer them over the oils just because they, for me, go on better. I don't have to wait for them to dry. You can dry them with a hairdryer and they just go on really nicely. So I guess this is kind of like a staining process. You're kind of just adding in tones into the white. I just really watered it down and hit it with the hairdryer to speed up the drying process. Just adds in some nice transitions to the white and some variation. And then you can go in with like tactical pools and stuff where the water or stain or whatever was going on in that universe sort of pooled in the crevices of the model. I was making sure to get it into the cracks and give some really nice variation across the surfaces. And then I just went in with some really unwatered down versions of the raw umber and just sort of created these textures of really dark areas and staining. I think this was really unwatered down versions, and I was just kind of tapping it and with my finger and sort of smudging it. Just pulls into all of the cracks and looks like that's where the staining is supposed to be. And then it's mostly just about defining the edges and surfaces that you want to define. Again, it's sort of like edge highlighting, but not really. You're just defining those shapes. And then you can also add in some water streaks, so there's like running streaks, which are really cool. I always like to bring those in. From some of the chips. And then you can just feather them out. I blocked in the interior of the helmet with 3rd gen AK black and pretty much just left it like that. I didn't really do anything else to it after that. And the aviator hat, I just painted brown, washed it with some burnt umber, and used some other brown colours for highlights. I didn't particularly film much of that. My head kept getting in the way and I was just hovering over it and it just didn't work. So I tried a few different methods for the clear visor. I tried burning it with fire to do like a flame polish. I tried some glass polish, but none of it really worked. The only thing I found to work well enough to get away with was gloss varnishing everything that I had sanded down. It ended up not being totally translucent, but I think I got away with enough of it to call it a translucent visor. I think if I was to do this again, I would need to make the visor a bit thicker. I think the thinness of the print really affected the end result. So this was trying to figure out how to do the strap for the chin strap. I used some Tamiya QuickType, but it really needed some internal integrity or like strength. So I used some very thin copper foil, cut some strips out of it to the size that I needed, and then embedded that into the Tamiya. That meant that it would paint well and would have some rigidity. So I basically just flattened out some Tamiya QuickType between some baking paper so it didn't stick to anything. And then I just embedded the foil strip inside of the Tamiya. Basically just making a sandwich so that it has some strength and you can fold it around without it breaking. Using a paintbrush as a roller is not advisable, so I went and got a proper roller. And then I just used really heavy pressure, trying to get it as thin as possible. And then you can see the strip of foil embedded in between it. The Tamiya had dried quite a lot by now, so I just used a knife and ruler to cut to the very edge of the strip of foil to cut out my chin strap. And then I just basically let that set fully cure and try to get it to go in between the slots on the chin strap, which was very difficult. I was getting very frustrated with how hard it was to hold everything together. This is where I did make a mistake though. I cut it way too short. I should have left that little bit on, which was annoying. In hindsight, I should have measured it first. And then eventually I got it through the slots in the chin strap and sprayed it up. And you can see you can really maneuver the Tamiya QuickType around without it breaking. I was trying to get this form of it where it would like hang down by the side, because obviously I just cut it too short, and by the time I realised I couldn't do anything about it. And that was the finished product. You can kind of see the visor's not totally clear, which is a bit disappointing, but I think it works well enough. And then you got all the cool weathering. Honestly, the weathering is just the best part of it. And this is the side-by-side of the two helmets. I think it was probably the best choice to not put the massive bust in. It just would have been too massive and overwhelming, and I think they look pretty cool as they are. And that's the finished product. Hopefully some of the techniques in this video will be useful to someone. I'm sure there's some more Star Wars helmets I could make. I've thought about maybe doing the Bad Batch versions, which would be really cool. And I'll see you on the next one.